Hey y'all, Daniel Aaron back with you, your guide to vibrant living. And today, having had the great blessing to synchronistically connect just in the right timing to meet up with Ibu Ida, who is a high priestess in Bali who's got an amazing story. I saw her in Bali maybe 5 years ago and then just happened to line up to see her today. And one of the many things that came for me in that, as she Jonathan introduced her and told the story of her awakening, it reminded me of a couple things. One, how amazing are stories of awakening. And personally, in the last 22 years, I've been obsessed with them. I've read, listened to, watched hundreds of them at least. And also what's beautiful about, part of what's beautiful about these stories of awakening is that, one, it shows that it's possible. Two, is there are, while no one else's awakening story can be our own, by definition, we have to have our own type of awakening, and it has to be different than anyone else's. When we see this one and this one and this one, we often get little pieces, almost like notes that create music, and while none of our stories will be the same as anyone else's, certain components may be. And when we see that, oftentimes it awakens for us the possibility, like, oh, right, that's available. That could happen for me. I could not exactly create it, though I could move myself toward it. And it also reminded me today that I have not shared in any public way my own experience of spiritual awakening, which I won't do in any detail here, because this is continuing my commitment to Facebook Live minis. I will say, though, that my experience was one of I was blindsided. I had no desire. I was not moving toward it. I didn't have any spiritual practice. I didn't care. In fact, I was agnostic. I pushed spirituality and religion away. So my experience of awakening felt like God reached down, grabbed me by the hair, and pulled me up and said, hey, look, there is more to life and reality than you have known. And one of the effects of that for me was it was incredibly disruptive and confusing, scary, and really shook me up. I didn't know what was going on in my life. I didn't know what was going on in life, and it set me back quite a bit. It was one of the most graphic examples for me of 2 steps forward and then a big step back, which felt like, it felt like death in many ways. I actually got depressed a little while after that awakening because I felt so confused and disoriented as to who I was. In retrospect, I also know that that was integration time, that period of disappearing from the world. I needed that in order to, in one way, ground the energetics of that awakening. Now, kundalini I mentioned in the title here because they're often associated, spiritual awakening and kundalini awakening. Kundalini awakening, and all of these terms, by the way, drive me crazy because they're so general, overused, misused, that it's hard to make any sense of them. Still, kundalini awakening often refers to, from yoga terminology, Sanskrit terminology, something that happens for somebody where an energy that is said to be trapped at the base of the spine, pressed down like a snake coiled 3 times, awakens, and that brings some energy up the spine. And some of the byproducts or symptoms of that we see sometimes are people whose eyes kind of roll back a bit, or this kind of shaking thing. Speaking in tongues may even be related to that in some way. One of the challenges is many times when people are practicing in order to create an awakening, sometimes those symptoms are sort of self-induced or maybe even imagined. So sometimes it can be tricky when seeing somebody doing, the practice where you're actually shaking yourself, as opposed to the spontaneous thing where it happens for you or to you. Now, my first awakening did not have any of those symptoms, or hardly any of them, and it only came later through a very bizarre coincidence experience that somebody mentioned the word kundalini awakening, and then I learned about it. Subsequent further awakenings did have that kind of experience, and I was very grateful to have some reference point for it. All right, now, what's important about kundalini or spiritual awakening is, one, it can happen to us out of the blue. Someone like Byron Katie is a great example of that. Eckhart Tolle is another good example of it. And it can also be something that we move ourselves towards but through practices, or it can be a combination of those two things. One of the great hallmarks, though, is that we see things in a new way. We understand ourselves and the world in a new way. Doesn't necessarily mean that we are enlightened. In fact, I eschew that word because enlightened implies before and after, incomplete, complete, and life doesn't work that way. Life and spirituality is ever evolving. We are always learning how to experience ourselves more and more as the divine, as growth, as life. That's the law in life. You keep growing. All right. I'm going to pause it there, and I'm actually in the process of writing more details on this, and I'll share more about it soon. If you have questions about awakening or kundalini awakening, the value, the importance, what to do with it, let me know. If any of y'all are interested in joining our sangha, which is like a club, a membership vitality club. Your Vibrant Life Now is the name of it. Today is the last day if you join, you actually will get a one-to-one coaching session with me, which I look forward to, so that we can give you a jump start to get some really cool clarity to ensure that you get the most out of our Satsang and Sangha, the community, and the teachings. And well, that's all I'll say about it for now. Well, one more thing is I feel so blessed for this opportunity, this technology, to share like this, to work with people in the group, to work together across the world in a way that's so easy and accessible, especially compared to what it used to be, the cost of travel and in person. Thank you. Thank you to you for tuning in. Thank you to the divine and our human ingenuity to keep creating these technological advances that are tapping us more into our spiritual truth, our interconnectivity. And with that, I shall leave it. And I leave you all for now. I will see you soon. Thank you.